when I went to college in Fort Collins, Colorado, which is just 42 miles north on I-25 from where old Chrissy Poo murdered his family. And it is freshman year, and I kind of had my little core group of friends and in the dorms. And then for freshman year ends, and we signed a lease for like a 5-bedroom house a couple miles from campus. And so it's me and 4 buddies, and but the 4 buddies, freshman year ends and it's summer, right? And then so my 4 buddies, they all decide to go home back to Grand Junction, like our hometown where we grew up. I was the only one that decided to stay in Fort Collins. So all my buddies go home, and they're gonna go home for the summer, come back in, a couple months. But I was the only one that stayed. So I'm in this 5-bedroom house all by myself. It's summer. I'm a sophomore in college. I have nothing to worry about. I don't really have too many friends that I know to hang out with, but it's fine. I'm just kind of bumming around. I got this 5-bedroom house. So one day I'm just kind of walking around, killing time. I didn't have a job that summer or anything. And I run into this guy that I had also known in the dorms, and was like cool with this group, but hadn't really ever hung out with them. And I was talking to him, and I was like, yeah, I'm up here. All my buddies went home. I'm just up here kind of bumming around for the summer. And he was like, oh, well, we got a poker game. I don't know when it was, every Thursday. So you should come tomorrow night, if you're looking to do something. And I was stoked because, like I said, I hadn't been doing anything. I had just been kind of bumming around. So the next day, I head to this poker game. I like playing poker. And we sit down, and they're like, oh, Chris, have you met Chris? Chris is coming. And I had met this guy, Chris, one time, and he's kind of, I don't even really know how to describe him. He's kind of this big dude with a thick neck, and he's one of those dudes that's really good at wakeboarding, and he's really good at skateboarding and longboarding. He's one of those dudes that just can do a backflip off of any ledge that he can find, And they're like, yeah, Chris is coming. And I'd never hung out with this kid. So I was like, oh, yeah, cool. I'm just playing poker. And so Chris shows up. And before he shows up, they're like, oh, yeah, Chris has started to sell a bunch of weed. So if you want to buy any weed, I was like, oh, okay, cool. And so Chris shows up. And from my experience, there's 2 types of weed dealers. There's like one that's just like a really nice guy that they're just like, man, like, listen to the part in this song, like right here, isn't that sick? Like, they're happy. And then there's the other type of weed dealer that's kind of like always mad and like has that look on his face of like, I'm a drug dealer, like what? Like, and Chris was the latter. He was kind of one of those angry drug dealers. So he shows up. And again, this is my first time hanging out with this group of people, and also Chris. So I don't even really know. And so Chris sits down, and I think it was like a $20 buy-in to buy into this poker game. So very low. And he makes a big show of like pulling out this giant wad of cash, being like, I'm a drug dealer, and he buys into the game. All right. But I need to go back just a little bit. So at the beginning of the summer, I had noticed that parking to go to this university in Fort Collins, the college that I went to, parking was just a disaster. You really couldn't find a parking spot within 2 miles of the campus. But I noticed that the motorcycle parking was unlimited. Like, there wouldn't be a parking spot for a car within a 10-mile radius. But motorcycle park, they had this giant space like right where all the classes were, and it was never filled. There'd be like 2 crotch rockets and a moped, and that's it. The whole thing would just be this empty space. So I was like, I'm getting a moped. So right as summer started, I went online and I just searched for the cheapest moped that I could buy. And it was a Chinese company. And for $700, I got like the cheapest moped on the internet, right? And so I ordered it up. They sent it to my house. It came in this giant box, right? It took 2 weeks, came in this giant box. All I had to do was screw the review mirrors in, and it was good to go. I had this moped, and like one of the first or second nights that I had it is the night of this poker game. So it's like one of the first places I drove with my new shiny moped. It was like red and silver. I was all stoked. It was like summertime in Colorado. I had this little moped. I was in college. Just like, woo! Like, no worries in the world. Got a moped. Don't have to worry about parking. Got this big house to just myself. It was beautiful. So I go to this poker game, right? Drive my moped, park the moped like off to the side of this house where I'm playing poker, and go in, right? Chris comes in. Meet Chris for the first time, you know, kind of like, I'm a drug dealer, motherfucker. And pulls out that big wad of cash, buys into the poker game. So now we're playing poker. Everyone's meeting, kind of everyone's getting to know each other. And maybe like 20 minutes into the game, Chris goes, hey, whose moped is that out there on the driveway? And I was like, you know, while I'm playing cards, I'm like, oh yeah, hey, it's mine. I just got it. It's like 2 days old. Pretty cool, right? And he was like, yeah, like, I've actually been looking for one just like that. Which is weird, because I just Googled moped, you know, and it was, so I don't know, like, how you would look and not find one. So, the cat, sorry. So, yeah, he was like, I've been looking for one like that. And I was like, oh, I got it online from this website. It's Chinese website. I can give you the website. And he's like, I'll give you $700 for it. And again, he was kind of playing that like drug dealer, like I got money, like I'm not going to go to a website, and just kind of to like impress everyone. I think he was like, I'll pay you $700 for it. And I was like, nah, you know, I just got it. It's just brand new. I just got it 2 days ago. And in my head, I'm thinking I paid $700 for it. So I'm not going to, I had to wait 2 weeks. You know, it doesn't help. Like, I was like, I'll give you the website. And he was like, I'll give you $1,000 for it. And I was just like, all right. You know, in my head, I was like, I paid $700 for it. So he counted out from his big wad of bills $1,000 cash, handed it to me. I took the key off my keychain and handed it to him. We finished the poker game, and then he left with the moped, and I walked home. And I got home. I went on the same Chinese website, and I bought the better one up. It was a little bit faster. It was like a little bit bigger. It had, I don't know, like a few more bells and whistles in the dash. You know, it was there was like a $700 one, and then there was like $1,000, like $45 one. And so I just went directly home and bought that one. 2 weeks later, comes in a big fucking box. I put the review mirrors on, and just like that, I got a moped again. Well, over the next year, I ended up becoming real good friends with that group that I played poker with. And in that group was actually Chris's brother. So I became real good friends with Chris's brother. And it's crazy that his name is Chris. It's like, how many Chris's am I going to talk about? So I became real good friends with this group, started hanging out with them a bunch, almost started becoming like my main friend group. And it kind of just started to come out, I guess, through the friend. Everyone started kind of talking about it, that Chris overpaid for my moped, right? And that I had immediately just bought a better one, and he felt like I ripped him off. And like the vibes was he was mad at me because I ripped him off for this moped, right? But in my head, I'm like, you offered me $1,000. I was trying not to sell you the moped, but you offered. When you offer something and then someone accepts, it's on you. You know, that was my thing, is like, I'm sorry, Chris, but it's on you. You offered But what I did learn, which is unfortunate because I became really good friends with Chris's brother, is that Chris, it's real sad, just suffered from like a mental illness, whether it was schizophrenia or really bad bipolar or something. It was just not a good situation. And so Chris's parents had sent his brother out to go to college, but Chris, because of kind of his mental problems, couldn't really swing going to college, but they didn't want him to kind of miss out on the college experience and just have to stay home in Minnesota while the younger brother that doesn't have mental issues goes and has this like fun time in Colorado. So what they did is they sent Chris out too, to just kind of have the college experience, which is tough on Chris because we're all in college, living that time, and he just can't quite, swing it. And so he has a bunch of jobs, like he sold a bunch of drugs for a while, and then he painted houses for a while, and he could never really keep anything down because of this. And I had no idea he had mental problems, or I would have never sold him the moped even for $1,000. But I had just met him and he had offered me $1,000. And so long story short is he's real mad at me. He's real mad at me that he thinks that I just really burned him on the moped deal. And he thinks that I'm like talking behind his back, telling everyone that I burned him. And it's not a good situation. And then, so like fast forward a whole year, and it's finals of that next year. So the finals for sophomore year, and I drove the moped to finals, took my last final, drove it home. I used to just drive it right up onto the lawn and park it right by the front door of this house that we lived in. And just drive it up there just like an asshole college kid. And parked it, like had a little dinner, and then went out and hit the town because I was done with finals and just got hammered. Just got completely wasted the way college kids do. Got a ride home that night, and maybe at like 2 a.m, went to sleep. Was woken up at 4 a.m. by my roommate Pete shaking me. Pete's this big old dude, shaking me, punching me. He said it took like 10 minutes to wake me up just because I was drunk. And he's waking me up. And finally I wake up. I have no idea what's going on. And he's like, the fire department and the police are here. You got to come downstairs. And I was like, what the fuck? So I finally like wake up enough. And I go downstairs. And there's like 10 firefighters in like the entrance of this house we live in, and there's a bunch of cops. Oh, little tea, everyone. She's getting a drink. There's a bunch of cops and everything in this entranceway, and they're asking me, and I'm still just groggy and wasted. They're asking me, is this your moped? And what I think they're doing in my drunk, groggy brain is I think they're trying to say that I drove the moped home drunk. So I'm sitting there in my underwear screaming at police and firefighters like, this is bullshit. I got a ride home. You're not giving me a DUI. And they're just kind of looking at me like, what is this little weirdo talking about? What's he doing? And I'm sitting there being like, I got a ride home. And then finally, this big, giant firefighter grabbed my little body, like grabbed my shoulders and just shook me and goes, son, look at your moped. And I looked through the front door, and my moped was a smoldering, burnt chunk of metal sitting in the snow. There wasn't anything left. The tires had melted off. Anything plastic or vinyl was gone. Anything rubber was gone. It was literally, if you've ever seen a car burn for a long time, like there's this feeling of like afterwards, like, whoa, like a lot of stuff is gone. It's like this metal frame. I had this just metal frame sitting in the yard, and I was like, oh my God. And then I kind of came to a little bit and talked to the fire department, and they were telling me when they pulled up, there was 10-foot flames. Someone called and said the house was on fire, and there was 10-foot flames. And they put it out, and the rain gutter on the front of the house was melted. The mailbox, which is screwed right by the front door, had melted. It was plastic. So they were saying we're very lucky that just the whole house didn't go up and we all just didn't burn alive in this house. So it was scary. And I met with the like an arson investigator the next day, and he was saying that it tests positive for gas, but it would anyway because there's gas in it. But he was saying that he's never seen a moped that had been off. I hadn't driven it for hours because I had gotten home, and then I had left and like partied all night, and then came back, and it still was fine. So a vehicle that had just stayed cold for that long probably isn't going to burst into flames. And so the general consensus is someone dumped gasoline all over it and burned it. And I didn't snitch on him. I didn't tell because I was like, he's already fucking crazy and he already hates me. And what is like, what are they going to do? They probably can't prove it. So I didn't tell him that I thought it was Chris, but in my head, it's gotta be. It's like it drove him crazy all year that he had thought he had gotten the worst end of the moped deal, and I had bought another one, and he had actually trashed the one he bought from me. He had been pulling his friends on longboards, like towing them, and it's just this crappy Chinese moped, not built for that. And so at some point, the motor just took a crap and quit working, and then he next time I saw him was like, you sold me a crappy moped. And I was like, no, Chris, I sold you a new moped. You ruined it. It's not built to do that. And then the other piece of evidence that I just think seals the deal that it was Chris is like a year or two before this, he was really mad at someone, and he was caught like trying to blow up their car, basically like putting a handkerchief in the gas tank and was going to light it, and then the person came out and he like ran away. It's also a tough situation that I was just really good friends with his brother, and I know that his brother just has mental problems, so I don't want to like him to go to jail. It just was a weird situation. And then like I saw Chris like a while later, and he was like, do you think this was me? And I was like, I don't know, dude. Like, to be honest, I just don't even want to like think about it. And then just it just has a really sad ending. So I ended up like buying another moped from someone else that I worked with like later, and everything was fine. But Chris actually ended up, he had pretty wealthy parents. They got him a place, like an apartment in Boulder, hoping that he could just like live in Boulder in this nice apartment, have some sort of normal life. And his parents came from Minnesota to visit him. And they like come into this nice apartment that they had built, and there was just like graffiti. He had like spray painted all the walls with spray paint. I think they came in. It was kind of the oh shit moment where it's like, oh man, like he is not in a good place mentally. So then they brought him back to Minnesota, and he was living with his parents again, just really struggling with kind of his purpose in life, and ended up committing suicide. So just a real sad story. All right, so today I'm going to tell you guys the story of the Riemel twins. And the Riemel twins were a pair of identical twins that I grew up with and were a staple in my friend group through high school. And usually with identical twins, someone can tell them apart. The parents, people that have hung out with them for years, their faces are a little different or something. But with the Riemel twins, No one could. And one was name was Roger, and one was name was Emil. But since no one knew which one was which, we just called both of them Remel. And they loved it. They were as twins as it gets. They had one wardrobe, so you couldn't even really be like, all right, so Emil is the one with the red Nike shirt and the cargo pants with the ripped knee, because the next time you would see him, and they had one bank account, one wardrobe, one room, one bed, one car. They shared everything. They were completely inseparable. And they just were awesome. They were so nice, and they were just extreme guys. So it's like I was talking to my friend Patrick to get some of the details of this story that I had either forgotten or never knew. And he was telling a story about how anytime they would call and say, hey, we're going up to the mesa, we're going up to the mountain, you want to come? He would hang up the phone and be like, well, I might die today, because that's just the kind of guys that Roger and Emil were. When they picked him up that day, he opened up their vehicle and they had a street luge, a snowboard, and a keg of beer. And at one point, I think junior or senior year, they bought this old camper. It was like a tiny little Winnebago camper. And that camper with those two twins just became, it was any camping trip or party that we would throw, that camper would be parked in the primo location, right by the fire, keg going, Remel out there, both the Remels out there just having fun, and they just were great guys. And their parents lived, it was a pretty cool place as far as Grand Junction, where to live, is they lived on this top of the bank of the Colorado River. So I'd only gone over to their house where their parents lived one time, but so if it was like their senior party or something, their graduation party. So we go over there to their parents' house, and they had attached this insane rope swing where you would jump off like a 20-foot bank, and you would swing out way above the water. And I gotta say, the Colorado River is no joke. It's not a type of river you can just like walk through or even swim through. It is certain times a year, and it was this time of year, it is moving. It is intimidating. And the banks at this are very wide, so if you couldn't even swim up. So it's this raging river. And the Remel twins have it set so they have a jet ski so that they can lower into the river. So one of them is on this jet ski, just in the river. And if he stops the gas at all, the jet ski is immediately swept away, and then like he comes back. So one of them is on a jet ski, and one of them is 20 feet down the river looking for logs, and my friend Patrick is ready on the rope swing. So when one of them gives the word that there's no logs, that was the extent of the safety procedure. It was just being like, I don't see any giant logs. Looks good to me. And so when he gave him the all clear that there was no logs, I watched Patrick, who was another just extreme, probably could have gone pro skiing, was always flipping and twirling around on skis. Something about Colorado just brings out the extreme dudes. They go skiing every day and they do all these flips and twirls, and I was just not that type of person. So Remel 1 gives the okay, no logs, and Patrick, and this is burnt. I told him this last night. We talked until about midnight, but I'll never forget this. Patrick jumps off this little platform that they had set up, swings probably 20 or 30 feet above the river, lets go, grabs his ankle or grabs his knees and tucks, does a double backflip. It's just like, what the fuck? Does a double backflip, lands in the raging river, that's moving so fast that you would be in California in 7 minutes if lands in the river, is totally swept away. I kind of was like, did he break his neck? Is immediately swept away out of sight, and then the other Riemel 2 on the jet ski rips by, picks him up, pulls him up on the jet ski, and then they trade positions. One goes to log, and I was just sitting there on the shore, fully clothed, just being like, these dudes are fucking nuts. I wouldn't have swung off that rope swing for $10 million, let alone try to do a flip or anything. I probably would have let go, slammed into the bank. My spine would have been sticking out of my neck, just like, Jesus! But it's just the type of guys that they were, just dangerous. I mean, that's how Patrick's mom, we were laughing, is anytime Patrick would go hang out with them, his mom would be like, I love those guys, but they're just dangerous. And they were. They just were street losing, keg drinking, rope swinging, backflip motherfuckers. Just crazy Colorado young dudes. And they had this camper, like I said, that was just classic. And they would just sleep in it wherever they were. They had the type of parents that were great and that really loved them and looked out for them, but that were, they had freedom. And so if they were hanging out at their camper and it got late, they would just sleep in their camper right there. Or if we were, they were always down. You want to go out to the desert and start a fire and have a camping trip? They were just down, and they were so nice. And there's great stories how, like, one of them, it was way better at math and one was way better at English, and no one could tell them apart, even the teachers. So that one would take the math tests and one would take the English tests. And I remember after I was in a math class with one of them, Roger, and we took this test, and it was one of those stressful tests. And walking out, I was like, how'd you do, Roger? And he was like, I'm emo. And I was like, you son of a... And yeah, and so as we moved towards graduation, we wanted to do a prank, or like a senior prank, and we didn't want, the year before, the seniors had like done a bunch of damage, and we didn't want to do that. So our idea for a prank was we were going to get there the night before and camp out in the teacher's parking lot. There was a teacher's parking lot super close to the building, and then the student parking lot way far away. So we're like, you know what? We're going to park in this teacher's parking lot. And so we get there the night before. We all park, take up every spot, set up tents, set up little tables, and we just stayed in the parking lot all night and camped. And we thought for sure that the cops would be there any moment to break it up. So we purposely, no one brought any beer or weed or anything, because we thought for sure, all right, the cops are going to come, and then we'll be able to confidently be like, heh, nothing here. And then the Riemelnators show up in the camper and just like up the curb, the camper part's like shaking, and they pull up just right by the thing, and we're like, yeah, the Riemels are here. And they brought a keg. They brought their standard pony keg that just was always in their camper. So it just went from like, you guys, let's just not, let's just have we'll camp out in the parking lot. And then it just turned into a good old-fashioned party. And at some point, I went to bed, and I was sleeping in the back of a truck. And I was woken up the next morning early by a cop knocking on the truck going, Mr. Sharp, wake up. We're searching all the cars. Wake up. And so I sit up, and the principal and the cops are there, and teachers are trying to pull into the lot and seeing just everyone in there and just being like, what the hell? And like having to like angrily pull out. And so they were like, yeah, we're searching the cars. Open your door. And I was like, I was confident. I had nothing in my car. And so I was saying, geez, Officer Grady, you seem stressed this morning. And I opened my car door, and they shuffle through. But they were going around kind of, everybody parked in a circle and hung out in the middle. So they were going around searching everyone's car. and the camper was last. And I was like, oh no, the keg is in there, which was an immediate minor in possession of alcohol ticket with the cops. It was an automatic 5-day suspension. They had said, like, if you get in trouble in these last couple of weeks, you couldn't walk in the graduation. And so they're searching each car going around in this half circle, and everyone was kind of just looking at, like, oh no, are they in there? What is going on? And finally they get to him and they rap on the door. Like, Remels, open up. We got to we're searching the cars. And they open the door of the camper, and they're both they look the exact same. They're both just, groggy and they're like, all right, we'll search the camper. And I'm just sitting there like, no, they're about to find it. Damn it. Like, and they search it and they don't find anything. And they're like, all right, good job, you guys. And then after they searched everything and they didn't find anything, they were actually in pretty good spirits. They were like, that was a good prank. And all the teachers had to park way far away. But later that day, I was like, what did you guys do with the keg? And I guess after I had gone to bed, they had thrown it on the roof of the school. So here's the cops and the head principal searching their car, being like, something had to have been illegal last night. We got to get someone in trouble. And probably like 20 feet away, just right up on the roof, they just, but just totally nuts. And then, so we all graduate. There's that summer. And then I went off to school 3-4 hours away in Fort Collins. And they weren't the college type, and which I respect. I love my mom, but all growing up, my mom was like, you have to go to college because you don't want to dig ditches for the rest of your life. And now looking back, all my friends that didn't go to college and dug ditches have nice cars and they own a house with a family. I don't know if college is if I ever have a kid, I'm going to maybe like a trade school, be a locksmith. You can show up, hey, folks, I'm here to help. We'll get you guys unlocked, tussle the kid's hair, unlock their car in 2 seconds, charge them $1,200 plus an $800 unlocking fee. Anyway, but so they didn't go to college. So I went to CSU and didn't hear much about the Remel twins for a year or two. And then I get a phone call a couple years after living in Fort Collins, and it's them. And they're saying, hey, Scott, we got our pilot's license. We own a plane. Oh, yeah, one thing before that is, that camper that they had, this was a close call. The camper that they had, they rolled it. They were trying to take this curve going way too fast, rolled it. The whole camper part exploded into a million pieces. And one of our friends was driving and just all of a sudden saw their camper, saw cops and lights and ambulances, and saw their camper upside down, or saw the vehicle upside down. The camper had blown up into a million pieces. And so they were like, oh my God, I just drove by Roger and Emil. So we thought they died in a rollover accident. Turns out they were fine, just like they always are. And so that was in high school. And so that their classic camper exploded and they bought another one. But anyway, so I get a call, just hadn't talked to him for years. Scott, we got our pilot's license. We have a plane. Only Remels would own a plane, It's just like, those were the friends that if anyone, has any of your friends from high school ever called you and say, hey, we own a plane now? And so I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, we own a plane and we're trying to get hours to be commercial airline pilots. So we just landed in the little airport in Fort Collins. Do you want to come up in our plane? And now that I am the age I am, I would have never have done it. But just young college Scott, I was like, yeah, for sure. And so me and one of my roommates met up with them. got in their little plane. We went up, we flew around, we went and flew to Denver, we flew back to Fort Collins. They did a barrel roll where it goes upside down. They cut, I think you cut the engines so you're sort of like gliding and you're weightless, so everything's floating. So we did all that, and it was so good to see them. I think a lot of teachers and stuff thought they weren't going anywhere because they weren't the college type. And just to see them with both of them with their pilot's license and a goal to be commercial airline pilots. And it just was great. They seemed happy and everything just seemed awesome with them. And so the story of how they ended up with the flying is their dad worked for Rolls-Royce, the plane engine company, and so he was always around planes and got them into planes, and I think even at a young age was teaching them how to fly. And when you graduate from high school as a guy in Grand Junction, a lot of them either go to college or you go and you work on the oil rigs, which is called roughnecking, and it's a hard, pretty dangerous job. You got to be a hard, just built, tough person to do it. Crazy hours. A lot of them end up using drugs to help them work the hours, and it's I guess Chris Watts worked for oil and gas, so kind of that type of world. And so they weren't going to go to college, so they went and worked as for one of these oil and gas companies. And when they applied for the job, they said we're like a pair. We come as a pair. We don't split up. And the companies loved it. They were like, okay, great. You guys are going to be a little chain pair. And while working for this oil and gas company, they figured out that there is a huge need for, say, an oil and gas company, something breaks way out in the middle of nowhere, a little pump that causes the whole thing to have to stop. What they figured out is when that pump breaks, that company will pay a lot of money to get another pump as quickly as possible. So they created their own business slowly. They got their pilot's license and they got this plane. It was either a timeshare on a plane where a bunch of owners had it, and then eventually they got their own after they were making a little money. But they got access to a plane, and what they would do is, if one of these oil and gas companies needed a part or a plane, they would fly in their little plane, and they were getting hours anyway. They would fly to Texas, a couple hours, get the part, fly to Colorado or Wyoming, drop off the part, and make good money. And they would do it quick, and they didn't mind doing it in the middle of the night, and they started making a little bit of money, enough to, I think, get their own little tiny Cessna type plane instead of a timeshare on it. And this is the time that they came and picked us up. They were telling us, yeah, we're flying these pumps all around and getting our hours, and life is good. And so they left that, they landed and dropped us off, and we, waved to them goodbye. Like, see you later, Remo. So good to see you. Glad you guys are killing it. And we watched them fly off into the sunset, being like, man, I love those dudes. And then something pretty crazy happened. Is the next thing I heard about the family is their other brother, not a twin. Their other brother was driving in Grand Junction, and cops, the story is it was either a DUI type situation where he had been drinking, or maybe he had something in the car that he didn't want the police to find. But a cop went to pull him over, and he was pretty close to his house. So he just did the old, like, oh, I'm going home. And instead of pulling over and letting the cop do his thing, he just zipped home real quick, pulled into his driveway, and ran into his house. And the cop's story is that they were arguing. the cop was on one side of the screen door and he was on the other side of his screen door in his house, telling the cop to get the hell out of here, to beat it. I'm in my own house, scram, you know. And the cop, they're arguing, and the one side of the story is that the Riemels brother in his house like came towards the cop with either a weapon or just threatening. And the other side of the story is just the cop was this, you know, crazy just guy that was losing his temper. And we'll probably never know exactly what happened, but this cop shot their brother in the doorway of his own house and killed him. And so I hear that news and just being like, what? And I hadn't talked to Roger and Emil. They weren't really the type to be on Facebook or the type that you could call or text or anything. And so I remember hearing that, just being like, whoa, you know, how's the Riemels doing with that? And I heard from someone that it just wasn't good. And then so like I said, I'm just living the college life in Fort Collins. And then Patrick, who I talked to last night, who helped me out with a lot of these details. So then his dad is a orthopedic surgeon. So they have this really nice house and this driveway that you pull into and you can pull around and then pull out. Great family. Well, his dad would always work on the Riemels for free. They would do a backflip into the river and dislocate their shoulder, and then they would show up at Patrick's house and be like, you know, I think I messed up my shoulder. And his dad, who's an orthopedic surgeon, would be like, all right, come on in. I'll pop it back in for him. And so they had a good relationship. And Patrick's mom would be like, they're just dangerous. And so this is years later, after, you know, it had already happened with their brother. We had all been at college for years. So Patrick, or none of his brothers and sisters, had lived in this house for years. So it's just his parents. And so the next thing I hear after this crazy brother thing, where a cop kills him in his doorway, the next thing I hear is Patrick's parents, who, like I said, they haven't had a kid live in their place for years, come home from eating dinner and pull into their driveway, and Roger and Emil are in their driveway. And there's kind of like a older guy with them in his 40s that looks a little sketchy, and Patrick's parents are like, what's up, Roger and Emil? What's going on? And it just had felt like something has changed. And one of them was like, hey, Mr. Patrick's dad, he goes, hey, Emil hurt his shoulder. We were wondering if you could prescribe some painkillers. And this is at night. You know, they get home from dinner at night, and they were surprised to see them in the driveway, let alone with some guy. They're like, who is that? You know, he's just this older guy in his 40s. And they're asking for painkillers. And, you know, Patrick's dad is obviously like, no, I can look at a shoulder, or I can do something, but definitely not, you know, what's going on? And they were like, all right, no, it's fine. And they, you know, get in and zoom off. And so I hear that, and it's like, oh no. And at some point, one of them, and this had happened in high school too, and I always thought this was really cool. At some point, one of them was turned real religious. And so one of them was religious and one of them wasn't. And the other one respected it and would even go to church with them. And the religious one, at some point when they had a plane, started flying doctors to Mexico. Doctors Without Borders. They would fly a doctor down to Mexico, and they would spend time in Mexico, and then they would fly back. And Patrick, yesterday, talking on the phone to him last night, pointed out that this is almost the paradox with these two. Is it's like they started such a good flying doctors down to Mexico to help. Well, we don't know for sure, but I, we're we think maybe as the Mexico trips became more often that maybe some cargo was started to be transported. This is just speculation, but it's the fact that they were asking for pain pills kind of desperately late at night to Patrick's dad, and then they started, I don't know, started to go downhill, and they started to fly to Mexico all the time, and it just seemed like something had changed. And the next thing I heard was that, and again, who knows what actually happened with the, drugs in Mexico, but if it's anything like the way the Riemel twins did everything else, they did it to a level that is just unimaginably extreme and gnarly. It's just the way they were. They were such good dudes, but I don't think they had the ability to do something at a level that was safe for anything. And so whatever they were, what may have started with bringing oil pumps may have turned into God knows what down in Mexico, flying. I think it got pretty. And so then the next thing I heard is that they had, in Grand Junction, they had gotten to the airport to get in their plane and fly somewhere. And for some reason, the airport, either they hadn't paid a bill or something, but the airport was like, your plane is grounded until this happens, and they get into this argument with them. And the cops are called, and the cops get there, and this came out in the Grand Junction paper. One of them, as the cops are there and they're arguing and something happens, I don't know if the cops said, all right, we're taking you in or something. One of them makes a break for the plane, just going, well, I'll just leave with the plane, and then you'll never see us again. One of them makes a break with the plane, action movie style, jumps in, tries to get the engine going, starts pulling off, and the Grand Junction Police Department shoot out the front tire, and it skids off the runway to a stop, and they arrest one of them. The other one goes home for a few hours, and they do not separate. I'm telling you, they stay together. The other one I don't think knew what to do with himself, so went back to where this whole crazy thing with the police and everything happened, and ends up like either getting in a fight or just screaming, and then getting into a fight to the point where they had to call the cops back and arrested him, and they brought him to jail as well. And so I'm in Fort Collins just hearing these bits of information, just being like, what happened? How did it go from, we own our own plane, we got our license, we're going to be putting our hours together, and then we're both going to be commercial airline pilots? I really think if just like the cop wouldn't have shot their brother, I heard that just made him paranoid, and that brought him downhill. And then I think one of them really did have a really bad shoulder and had to go with, had pain, and maybe the classic opiate story where you start actually using it for the right reasons. And so I think just a few things go the other direction, and they're sitting here in commercial airline pilot suits, living in the same neighborhood. But so I hear, the epic action movie tried to take their own plane, shots fired. So I hear that, and I'm like, what is going on? And then the last thing I heard was that they had moved to Georgia together, and that on a bridge in Georgia, they had found one of them. I apologize for not knowing which one, but this is just kind of the story of their whole life. They had found like a cell phone and a wallet, or just a couple possessions, like a cell phone and a watch, or a watch and a cell phone and a wallet of one of them on a bridge, like sitting on the bridge. And yeah, and to this day we can't find anyone that has talked to the other one. And so it looks like a suicide. But yeah, I wish I had a better ending than that. I have no idea how the other one has held up without his twin. Talking to Patrick last night, we both, like, being such good friends with him, we both had the same feeling of like, no, what is he going to do? No, 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 you don't understand. They have to be together. And so hearing that one of them, it was just heartbreaking. But they are truly legendary individuals in my book, took everything to the extreme. And maybe in the great scheme of things, I don't think either of them were going to live long lives. You know, the type of people that do backflips into raging rivers and are picked up by their brother on a jet ski as one looks for giant logs. It's just not a, but in my opinion, they both of them lived beautiful lives and lives to the extreme and were so nice to everybody. And I just have only amazing things to say about their whole family. But that's the unimaginably sad story of the Riemel twins. And, all right. So today I got a story for you. And this tale happened in the late 90s in my hometown of Grand Junction, Colorado. And all of a sudden in Grand Junction, the word on the street became that, I don't even know how it traveled around, but all of a sudden the word was that the American Olympic volleyball team was going to be scrimmaging the Australian Olympic volleyball team, or possibly could have been New Zealand. I can't remember, but it was either New Zealand or Australia. And at this time, not too many things happened in Grand Junction like this. Now they have a semi-pro baseball team, and the college is much bigger, and they get more stuff. But in the late 90s, this was a big deal for Little Grand Junction. It was, are you going to the Olympic volleyball scrimmage? Yeah, I'm going. Anybody that was anyone was going to this thing. It was a town event. And it was in the big basketball gymnasium at Mesa State College, which I had been to just to see Mesa State College basketball games a bunch of times. And so the night of, me and my dad drive down to the gymnasium, and as we pull into the parking lot that's full and packed and, just a very bustling, busy place, and we park, and as we're walking in, you can just tell this is the place to be in Grand Junction on this night. Everybody was in their nice clothes and wearing their nice watches, and people that didn't normally have product in their hair had their hair combed and with product, and there was a lot of like, hey, how you doing? Good to see you. All right. A lot of like friends hugging and a lot of like business handshakes. Oh, good to see you at this thing. And there was a buzz in the air. And we walk into the college, into the hall area. We haven't gone into the gymnasium yet. And I see some of my buddies, they're there with their parents. So it's like, hey, dude, how you doing? And I actually saw the girl that I had a crush on, and I played it cool. I was like, oh, hey, you're here too. That's cool. And just basically everybody I knew was there in my little world. And so we're out in the hallway area talking to people, saying hi to my buddies. And then my dad and I head into the actual gymnasium, and they had transformed this gymnasium into an amazing, it didn't even look like the same gymnasium as we had seen the college basketball games. This place had an amazingly beautiful hardwood playing surface. just beautiful old school, really hard wood. But for this night, they must have buffed it out or put a coat of lacquer on it. I don't know, but I just remember walking into the gymnasium and looking at the wood and just being like, wow, it is beautiful, just clean and buffed and shiny, beautiful wood. And also, the gymnasium didn't have a jumbotron, the big screen that you see at professional sporting events. All they had was a little electronic sign that they could run letters across. That's what it normally had. But for the big night, they had installed a giant jumbotron on the side of the wall. And so, again, people in Grand Junction, we weren't used to a big jumbotron screen. So everybody's in the stands dancing, trying to, oh, look, we're on the jumbotron, trying to be on it. And they had installed a bunch of, usually it's just the lights so you could see in there, but they had installed a bunch of like concert lights that moved around and put colors everywhere, and the jumbotron was rocking. And then the last difference is they had put all around the playing court, the volleyball court, I don't really know what it's called, but all around where the actual court, they had put this barrier up. And so on one side of the barrier, it's like, here's where the people walked. You walked, and then you'd go to the stand. So it was like about waist high, actually. So on one side, closest to where the spectators were, it was a kind of a wall, waist high wall. And then on the side closest to so it's like a waist high wall where the people are walking to go to their seats. And then towards the court, so the court's over here, it's slanted at a 45-degree angle down. It was like a slanted barrier, so you couldn't go out on the court, and then this was slanted, so all the way around. So if the volleyball rolled to the barrier, it would roll up the 45-degree slant and then just roll right back to them. And so this slanted barrier went all the way around the court and was smooth and had all the corporate sponsors on it and had padding on it in case one of the volleyball players like fell onto it. And I just remember it looking very smooth and nice and crispy. And just the whole thing looked special and felt like a professional, even though it's just a scrimmage. I think that the reason they were doing this scrimmage was to sharpen up getting ready for the Olympics, but I still don't really know or remember why the United States volleyball team scrimmaged the Australians in Grand Junction. But we were there, and it was definitely a place to show your face. And Grand Junction is small enough where you know almost everybody, but it's big enough that not everybody likes you. So, you see your friends, you see a couple rivals. It's one of those cities. So we're in there, and we get a seat about, I don't know, 20 rows up from the court. And we're watching this thing. And if you've never seen Olympic volleyball, it is insane how good they are. They spike the ball they slam it down so hard that when it bounces up almost to like the ceiling, to the point where sometimes it was a little excessive. It was like, all right, dude, we get it. You slam it hard. Do you have to slam it every time? Is that just your thing? You slam it hard? And amazingly, how hard they slam it, sometimes the other team is able to still like get it, like boop, and it shoots it way up in the air. I was thinking, if someone slammed it that hard, I'm just getting out of the way. It's like, all right, dude, that's your thing. You like to slam it insanely hard. Well, you just I'm not going to. But they're amazing. And they were showing off because it's just a scrimmage. So, they're setting it up. Woo! The crowd's going nuts. The lights are going nuts. The jumbotron, the wood floor is gleaming. It's absolutely gleaming. And it's just a really electric vibe in there. Woo! So I want to say either there's 3 periods. I don't know what they were playing. 3 periods, but I think it was in between the second and third period. I said to my dad that I wanted to go get some snacks. And so he gave me a couple bucks, and I just went by myself. I walked down the stairs, about 20 rows, onto court level. So now I'm walking next to that slanted barrier right next to the court. So I'm on the court looking up at these, and they're all like 6'10", ridiculous looking men. And I'm just looking at them walking on, and the barrier's right here, and I'm just like, wow. So I walk out into the hall area, see some buddies. Hey, what's up? Yeah, how are you? And waiting in line for the concession stand. And I get up there and I ordered, I'll never forget to this day, I ordered a large Pepsi, which in those days it was just comically huge soda. Just a unnecessarily huge soda. It was in one of those big paper cups that are waxed with the old school Pepsi logo on it, and the plastic top where you can press what kind it is. Just a giant soda and a large popcorn. So I got my comically humongous soda and I got my large popcorn, and I'm walking back. And I walk back into the gymnasium, and I'm just, looking around, and I have probably 20 to 30 feet along the slanted barrier right by the court, and then I turn up and I go up the stairs. So as I'm walking on the court again, right next to the slanted barrier, I am just looking at the wood and the players, and as I'm walking parallel to the slanted barrier, holding the soda in one hand and the giant popcorn in the other, unconsciously I'm running. Just as I'm walking, the soda, I'm just sort of sliding the top of the soda on the top of the slanted barrier. Not even really noticing that I'm doing it. I'm just watching more, looking at the players, and what caused me to notice that I was doing it was at some point it was smooth, like as I'm walking, and I became conscious that I was doing it when it hit. I'm sliding it, and then all of a sudden it hit a bump, a lip. And I think this was where 2 parts of the slanted barrier were connected, were screwed together. And so as I'm walking, not really paying attention, sliding my soda on top of this, going back up to my seat, it hits this lip, and I wasn't prepared for it not to be smooth. And so I keep walking, and my comically humongous soda hits the lip and comes out of my hand. And that's when it starts to go in slow motion. And now, all of a sudden, my soda is not in my hand anymore, which was a strange feeling. And I'm looking at it, and by the time I even could have a thought, my soda had slid down about, because I was sliding it on the top of the bear, and when I dropped it, it fell onto the slanted side. And by the time I could even have a thought, my soda, which was comically humongous, had slid halfway down the barrier and was towards the court and was picking up speed. And I'm sitting there looking at it in total shock and amazement, just frozen, with a feeling of like I was just holding that soda, and now it's not here anymore. And I knew I just knew life was never going to be the same. And this soda picked up speed down the slanted barrier, hit the court, and shot. Because of the slant and the speed, it shot 15 feet out onto the court, just slid, and it happened so fast. All of a sudden, it's just gone, and I'm sitting there frozen, and it slides out onto the court, and then starts spinning, almost like a figure skater when they do that part where they spin and then they start spinning really fast, and everyone's like, "Yeah!" So my comically huge soda slides out onto the court before I even, and it's just out there. And I'm sitting there looking at my soda out on this beautiful wood Olympic court. And the players at this point have sort of noticed that there's a giant, large spinning, and it's spinning, and it seemed like to me that the whole lights of the whole arena had gone down except for a spotlight on my spinning soda, and it's on the court. It's on the and I'm sitting there staring at it, and in my head I'm like, please just let the lid stay on. Please. I think that's what I was thinking. I was like, just please, 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 please. And it's spinning, and it's spinning, and it's slowing down, and maybe I would say maybe it had like 3 or 4 spins left. It was slowing down. I was like, yes, please. And then with 3 or 4 left, the lid just popped off, and an unbelievable amount of Pepsi just was a tsunami on this glistening wood court. And now the Australians are like jumping out of the way and, oh shoot, like trying to keep their perfect court shoes. And ice is flowing everywhere, and you would think that there just seemed to be so much. It just kept shooting out, and because it was spinning, it kind of was like shot it everywhere. And I'm sitting there looking at it, just looking at the Australians jumping out of the way and people gasping, and I'm looking at it going, oh my God. And then I kind of go into self-preservation mode. I'm thinking, okay, did anyone see? You know, maybe no one saw how the giant soda got out there. Or maybe someone thought that someone threw it out there. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to play it cool. I'm still holding the popcorn. I'm just going to play it cool, and maybe no one saw. And I slowly look up, and on the newly installed giant HD Jumbotron is just a picture of me standing pathetically, looking at myself on the Jumbotron, holding my bag of popcorn. And as I'm on the Jumbotron, I start hearing my name. Scott, that's Scott. That's Scott. Just murmuring all over this gymnasium. And I'm like, oh, God. And I just put my head down and walked up the stairs and just went and sat down by my dad and was like, oh, God. Oh, no. And I could hear my name everywhere. It was awful. Just, Scott, that was Scott. Hey, Scott. And now the whole court crew, the ground janitorial staff, the whole crew, there was 10 people out on the court trying to clean up all of this Pepsi, and it looked like a comedy routine. Like someone would take a towel and try to soak up and get a bunch of ice, but then it would all, the ice would all fall back out, and someone was sliding and they were mopping, but it was more just pushing the Pepsi 40 feet. That, it was just a slop fest down there on the beautiful court. And they would get a place dry, and then someone would come out and step on it and shake their head, so they would mop it again. And I'm just sitting there this did not go the way I was hoping it would tonight. And finally the referee came out, and he looked at everything, and they're still trying to wipe it up, and they're doing a lot of shrugging and and finally the referee just comes out and he waves his arms, and everyone is like, wait, what? And they make an announcement, hey everybody, because of the spill on the court, and it's just a scrimmage, and there was just one period left, which is a third of the whole thing. we're just going to call it right there. Thank you so much for coming out. And then there was just like this dull, like, boo. Like, everybody, this was the night. Everybody was out. And so I just was sitting there with my head down, like, oh my God, please. And so just sort of awkwardly, like, the fun lights turned into, and it's just like the main house lights came up. And everybody was just like, all right, well, and just started packing up and getting up and filing out. And I remember on the way out, everybody was just like, yeah, like that saw me, like, yeah, good job, Scott. And I was just like, shut up, Jake. No one's ever liked you. At least I used to be liked. Just like, even the adults were like, good one, Scott. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. Let's get out of here, Dad. I was like, let's go. And that was the night that I ruined the American versus Australia Olympic volleyball scrimmage in Grand Junction, Colorado. And so my girlfriend and I and my grandma all sit down for my grandpa to tell this story. And he's a good storyteller. And he's very calm and he doesn't really get loud. And so he tells us this story that I'm going to tell you guys right now for this episode. And so just a little context is my great-grandpa, my grandpa who's telling this story, his dad in 1914 was trying to rent a ranch from an owner for 3 years, but the guy would only rent it for 1 year. And so my great-grandpa's name's Carl Sharp. So Carl says, you know what, the hell with this. I'm going to homestead in Colorado. He's going to do the homestead program, which what that was is, this is before really the United States has moved west. Everybody's moving west. So there's essentially unlimited land out west. It just went on forever. You know, it still does. If you've been to the middle of the United States of America, you know it's just flat, prairie, rolling hills, lonely land for as long as the eye can see. It is lonely out there. And so Carl, my great-grandpa, signs up where he gets 80 acres in Colorado on the very eastern part of Colorado in a town called Last Chance. And he gets 80 acres, and you get, if you got a farmer ranch on it, and you got to pay taxes on the land, but the government just gives it to you. And so he gets his 80 acres in Last Chance, and he and a couple other Sharps in the family take a train with everything they own all the way out to Colorado. And then once they get to Colorado, they put everything they own on a horse and carriage, and there wasn't even a road. It just was a road, and then a dirt road, and then the dirt road disappeared, and they just, on a wagon with horses, went into the unknown, just straight into nothingness. And the plan was they would get out there and build a little sod house just out of mud and grass, and then when they got a house put up, then a couple other people in the family would come out, and then they would attempt to try to turn that land into a ranch that they could live off of. And so Carl, and there's a funny story, it's a letter. So I'm getting a lot of the information off this. One of my relatives made this whole book with letters and newspaper clippings. And so they get out there and they build a sod house, and then the next wave of the family comes out. And in a letter, the next wave, they get out there and they're looking around, and it's just nothing. I can't even describe how in the middle of nowhere it is. There's no law enforcement, there's no fire, there's no grocery stores, there's nothing. Even to this day in Last Chance, Colorado, all there is church and a firehouse. Even in 2019, there's not one single business there. And so the second wave of the family gets out there, and they're riding out to the land in the horse and wagon. And one of them that had been out there like looked at him and was like, "So, what do you guys think?" And one of them looked around and goes, "There's nothing to think about. It just really is just nothing, just grasslands." The thumbnail that I'm using for this video is a picture of the ranch, but a generation later when my dad was growing up on it. So all those permanent structures. So it is just nothing, right? And so they homestead and turn it into a working ranch. And a lot of people that went out there failed because it's a hard, lonely life out there. And so as people would fail around my great-grandpa and want to leave and go back east, he would take over paying taxes on their land. And so he went from, and then he would be able to use that land and it would be his. So he, as people left and he started taking over, he went from 80 acres to about 3,000 for this ranch. And the last story I'm going to tell about Carl is in 1934. And this just shows you how just Wild West it was out there. So at this point, Carl had been working on the ranch for 20 years, and there's no fences. And so there's a lot of feuding over property lines and all that stuff. So in 34, the guy that owned the ranch right next to our families was named Essie. And Essie kept mowing a little bit farther over Carl's property line, every time. So it was a little bit, and then he kept kind of trying to push the property line over by mowing. And my great-grandpa, Carl, was like, after a while, like, the hell with this, and so I'm putting up a fence. And so he starts putting up a fence, and one day, Essie sees him putting up a fence, and he pulls up, parks, and gets out of his truck with a hammer and starts walking over towards Carl. And Carl pulls out a pistol, and puts it right in his face. And because Essie is a snitch and a coward, he called the sheriff later that night. So later that night, the sheriff shows up. The closest sheriff is 30 miles away. It takes about an hour to get out there. And so the sheriff shows up and arrests my great-grandpa, Carl, for carrying an illegal firearm and assault with a deadly weapon. And Essie's story is that he just came up and put a gun in his face. And our family story is that he walked up with a hammer, causing Carl to put a gun in his face. Carl goes to trial, gets convicted of carrying an illegal firearm and assault with a deadly weapon. And the penalty, ready for this, is $25 fine and 60 days in jail. But if he pays the fine, he doesn't have to do the jail time. And he also had to pay court costs, which were $1.25. And so Carl and his wife raise kids, and one of those kids is my grandpa that's telling me this story, and he marries my grandma, Betty. Her parents had also homesteaded, so they were in a ranch, in the area, and they met at the little high school, and they get married when they're teenagers, and they take over Carl's ranch. And poor Carl died of a bowel obstruction at some point. So my grandma and grandpa, who I hung out with all weekend, they take over this ranch, and they have 4 boys. They actually had 5 boys, but one of them died in just a horrible farming accident. And so they have 4 boys, and they're out on this ranch in the middle of nowhere in Colorado, nothing around, no law really, and that's where this story starts. Oh yeah, I want to tell you one other story. So we still have family. This will just tell you how wild it still is out there. So we still have family out there. one of my cousins was telling me this story. So he still lives out there. He's in his like 50s or 60s at this point, but recently they're out there and they had a prairie fire, which is just a huge grass fire, and it moves with the wind, so it just, these huge fields catch on fire. And the way you got to fight it is you got to get ahead of it and dig like a trench so it doesn't have anything, I'm sure it's just a total nightmare. So my cousin Larry, who's just a funny guy, and I always just wanted to sit next to him when I was annoying because I just always wanted to be around him, hear him tell stories when I was little. But recently they had this huge prairie fire, and Larry is out there trying to fight it. And he's in a truck, and the fire's moving so fast that it passes him in his truck. So all around him, he's just engulfed in flames. It's every window he looks out of is just totally black, and to try to get out of the fire, he floors it. But he's at this point, because it's all black and there's just fire everywhere, he gets turned around, and so he has no idea. He's flooring it. And if you're not on a road out there, it's just bumpy as hell. So he's just flooring it, and he has no idea if he's heading far, because he's all just turned around and discombobulated, and he has no idea if he's driving further into the fire or parallel to the fire or the right way out of the fire. And he's just flooring it, and he has no idea. And he said he was sitting there just in the bumpy truck, no idea where he was going, and he just, in that moment, kind of made his peace with the universe and that he might die. And it just, and then right when he sort of thought, well, this is it, he just, boom, he popped out into the clean sunshine air. And I always just think, man, like when that was happening, while he was just sitting there making his peace in a fiery hell with black in all the windows, I was probably in New York, like ordering a lobster roll or something, being like, hey, this is kind of nice out here. But the point is, it's still just rough, lonely country out there. All right, so this story is in 1952. So my grandpa sits us down and says, I got one for you, Scott. And so in 1952, my grandma and grandpa are in their 20s. They have 3 kids, and they're working on this ranch. And my grandpa's very handy, always doing projects, can really just do anything, can build anything. And so at this point, he's putting in a septic tank out there. You're always just trying to improve your situation out there. So he's putting in, they're digging, and they're doing it all themselves. They're digging this big thing. They're going to put in a new septic tank. And while he's doing this, a neighbor comes over that lives 3 hours away on a ranch named Clarence Haas. So he comes over to check. He heard my grandpa was putting in this septic tank, so he comes over to check to see how it's going. And so my grandpa and grandma, they're talking to Clarence. My grandpa's showing them how it's going, and my grandpa said that Clarence had been in the service and that he was a big hunter, and so the phrase my grandpa used is he was a real crack shot with a rifle, just a really good shot. And so they're, hey, later, look, check out the septic tank. Oh, that's looking good. They're doing neighborly stuff. And yeah, they thought Clarence was a good guy. And at this time, I asked my grandpa, he estimated that at this time of this story, their ranch had 1,000 sheep, 30 cows, 50 chicken, 5 pigs, a dog, and a few cats. So this was, it's a big working sheep ranch. And yeah, so, they're doing it. And Clarence, like I said, lived 3 miles away on a ranch with his mom. And my grandpa described his mom as a little too religious. She was just a little too into it. And her her strategy to deal with any problem or anything that her and Clarence would fight about, or just any problem that Clarence had, was just, more religion and her religious views. And my grandpa said she would really push her religious views on Clarence. And Clarence, wasn't really having it, and it would lead to these huge fights. They would have these huge fights, or Clarence would threaten his mom, and they're just in the middle of nowhere. So it would have to be scary for his mom, if Clarence would get mad. So on this particular day in 52, they got in a big fight, Clarence and his mom. And Clarence must have threatened her or gotten scary or something, because his mom leaves. And she calls the sheriff, who's 30 miles away, and said, Clarence has gotten a fight. He threatened me. I was scared, so I left. So the sheriff, who knew Clarence pretty well, had been out there a few times, was like, okay, the deputy and I will drive down there, and we'll talk to Clarence, we'll see what's going on, we'll make sure everything's okay. And so the sheriff and the deputy head out from 30 miles away. Like I said, it takes about an hour, because the roads become dirt, and then the dirt becomes more dirt. There's a lot of dirt out there. And so all right, we'll go talk to Clarence. And so they head out to Clarence. Well, my grandparents, Jack and Betty, they had decided to go to the movies this day, drive all the way into town, couple hours into town to see, and my grandpa called it the picture show. And so they drive in to the picture show, and which is an all-day event. So they drive in to town to see a movie, and so they're not really around. And that mid-afternoon, the sheriff and the deputy show up to the Haas Ranch. They get there, and they get out of the car. They pull up, and they get out of the car, and Clarence shoots them both dead. One shot each with a .30-30. And the sheriff was closer to the house, and the deputy was still in the police cruiser. So what may have happened is they pulled up, and the sheriff goes, hey, all right, I'll be back in a second. He gets out of the car, and from inside the house, Clarence takes him out, and then the deputy was still in the car. So possibly from inside the house, Clarence shot he's a good shot. He shot the sheriff, and then made the shot while he's sitting in the car. And there's that song, I shot the sheriff, but I didn't shoot the deputy. Clarence laid them both out. So he shoots the sheriff and the deputy dead, and then he lights the haystack on fire, and then he lights the house on fire, and then he leaves. He disappears. And so a neighboring ranch, some neighbors, everybody's very spread out. So way far away, these neighbors see smoke, thick black smoke. And imagine this scene. You're a rancher in the middle of nowhere in Colorado, and you look up and you see this black smoke, and there's not really the fire. The fire department is just the neighbors. If you have a fire, you just call your neighbors to help you. And so they see this smoke, and they go over there, and imagine walking up on this scene, a sheriff's cruiser with the door open, the sheriff dead, the deputy dead, and the huge haystack and the house on fire, and Clarence nowhere to be found. And so this turned into a manhunt with an armed and dangerous man. And so the word spreads that Clarence is on the loose with a gun, with his .30-30, and possibly homicidal, suicidal, whatever it is. And so the word spreads all around. And so everybody that night, as it gets dark, everybody that night plans to stay up, guns ready, lights on, in case Clarence comes to one of their houses. It's almost like when someone escapes from prison and all the houses in the immediate area have to be on alert because the person has to go somewhere. And so it's this high tension. Everybody's staying up. Everyone's getting their dogs and their guns ready to stay up all night to make sure Clarence doesn't come over. Well, my grandparents, Jack and Betty, have been at the movies, so they get back, late that evening. And because they've been gone, they haven't heard anything. They haven't heard the news. And so they get home like nothing's different. And they put the kids to bed, and they go to bed as if, it's a normal night. And the scary thing is my grandma was telling me that even if Clarence would have come over that night, even if they would have been sleeping and they heard the dog go nuts and they heard a knock on the door, if they would have opened it up and it would have been Clarence, since they hadn't heard about this and they thought highly of him, or at least, neighborly of him. And so she said, I would have let him in. And, luckily he didn't come over. But then the next day, this manhunt is still going. The next day, a police or a sheriff or somebody, a police sees a guy walking down the highway about 40 miles from his house. So he made it a long way. 40 miles holding a gun. He had sawed off the stock of his 30-30 for a pistol grip, and he was walking just down the highway holding the 30-30 on his side, just kind of walking. And the police saw him and started to kind of close in, pulled around, and as he started to close in, Clarence put that 30-30 in his mouth and just blew his brains out right there on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere in Colorado. I thought of telling this story because on one of my last couple videos, someone commented either that they would like to see me in a police interrogation or asking if I had ever been in one, and the answer is no, I haven't. I probably wouldn't put myself in that position, just would say, yeah, lawyer, thanks. But it is fun to fantasize about how I would do, and I always think about it'd be funny if I was in the police interrogation, they're letting me sit in there alone for a while. Well, they come in at first, and they're like, all right, sit tight, we'll be right back. As soon as they leave, I turn to the camera in the corner and good evening, everyone, and welcome back. I'm in the hot seat. But anyway, I did get grilled really hard one time. I almost got in, I think, real trouble twice in high school. And one of them I got grilled pretty hard by the head administrator, the freshman class, which I was in administrator, and then they had the police in there and the whole thing. So I'll tell you the story. And yeah, and we'll have hopefully a nice little day. But first, it's relevant that in 8th grade, so the year before freshman year, I went through a pretty substantial shoplifting phase, where we would just go to the mall and steal stuff from Target. And it started the summer before 8th grade. I saw one of my friends steal a computer game from Target, and it looked like the coolest thing I've ever seen. It was just the rush that came with it. And we had this little group of friends, and we would just, that's a strange age for boys. We would just go and find a field, ride our bikes to a field, start a little fire or something, and then go to the mall and steal some batting gloves, and then go swimming, and then break a wine bottle in the alley, and then take a nap. And it's a weird time. And so nothing we stole we needed, or we ever tried to sell it, anything. We just liked the process of planning it, pretending that we're in a heist, and then going and doing it, and then having the high of, and it was short-lived. Like I said, it came and went pretty quickly. I think as you starting to get older, you start to realize okay, the penalty of getting caught is going up. I'm not just going to be like some like goofy kid that gets caught. And then we also saw one of our friends actually get caught, and he was sitting there. Seeing him sitting there in handcuffs waiting for his mom to get there, it was just like, yeah, that's not worth it. And also too, there's a feeling of like, all right, well, it's not that cool just to be a thief. I don't want to be a thief. And so, like I said, it came and went. So that was 8th grade. Then freshman, start high school. And I was really, me and my buddy both, were really interested in being a part of the high school TV station. It was called KTGR. So we wanted to be a part of that. And at the first few weeks of the school year as a freshman, they try to hold events. So if you're interested in something, you can go and meet the people that already do it, and you guys get it. So we went, and we were hanging out, and I think it was in the gym or it was outside, and there was refreshments and stuff. And so me and my buddy find the KTGR guy, the guy that he's a senior, but he was actually a 5th year senior, which I don't know how that happened. So he was even older than a normal senior, but he was like the guy when it came to the TV station. So we were and he was like, yeah, it's so great you guys are interested, and, you know, it's great. I've been doing it for years, you know, telling us about what it's like working for the TV station with the high school. And we're like, yeah, we're in. And he goes, well, actually, I got a key to the studio. Do you guys want to just go up and check it out? I'll show you all around. And we were like, oh, definitely. So me, my best buddy in life at the time, and another guy that we were just like acquaintance with, but he was interested in the TV. So us 3 freshmen, so we're 15 years old, and this 5th year senior that is like the head of the TV department. So we go up, and the school is essentially closed. There was like the official come and meet, get involved type of thing, but we now have left the official like get involved. And we are walking with this guy up to the 2nd floor where the TV studio is. So we get up there, and he's showing us around. All right, this is where you sit. This is the cameras. Isn't that cool? This is, and it was like a big room with tall ceilings and lights. And I was sitting there like, yes, this is exactly what I was hoping for. This is going to be my place in high school. And then the 5th year senior goes, hey, do you guys want to see something funny? And we were like, yeah, you know, He's a senior. We're a freshman. Of course we do. You know, I want this guy to like me. So he goes, all right. And he pulls this VHS, the sketchy blank black VHS out of his bag. And he puts it in a VCR and he cues it up. And it's another freshman, or I think sophomore. He might have been 1 year older than us, but that we knew, naked, running through a park. And it's like you can tell the 5th year senior is filming and kind of like laughing and being like, do it, and it'll like zoom in kind of like on the guy's dick, you know. He's like completely naked in a big famous park, and then like the guy runs around like streak, and he like streaks, kind of runs around, and then he runs back. And I think there was even like another person on there streaking, same thing, like a young 15-year-old boy. And so then it ends, and he's like, isn't that hilarious? And it was like, I don't know, I guess. And he was like, yeah, like, it's so funny. We're making this like streaking compilation. Like, would you want to do it? And I was like, absolutely not. And my other friend, he was kind of more thinking like, maybe it'd be funny, but he also said no. But then the other guy, the one that we were acquaintance, the third, I guess he wanted to do it or something. So he ended up, he was a trombone player, so he had his trombone there. So he gets naked in this room, and then I don't know how they decided on it, but he puts his dick and balls in his trombone and runs down the halls of the high school naked, wearing his trombone, and that's it, which is pretty memorable sight in my mind, and to be honest, pretty funny. And so that happened, and then it was like he gets dressed. It was like, all right, yeah, kind of a weird night, but anyway, we'll hit you up about the TV station and talk to you later type of thing. And And then a time later, I have no idea how long it took, but I don't know if someone that was on that tape, like one of the streakers, that one of the young naked boys that ended up on that tape, if the mom found out about it, or if the kid told the mom, or if they regretted doing it. I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden one day the cops came and pulled the fifth year senior out of his class, and then they went and searched his car, and in the car they found the VHS with a bunch of naked young 15-year-old boys on it. And as you can imagine, he got in an enormous amount of trouble. Just all the trouble that was available at that time for him, he got in it. And kicked out of school, the whole 9 yards. And so, because he had asked us to be on it, and we were there during it, I got called down by the administration, and so did my friend, and obviously the trombone dude. And so the point of telling this whole story is because of this, I really got to know the administrations. There's probably 350 people in my freshman class, and it took most of them a while to get to know the administration, for the administration to get to know them, their name, their stuff. But I was brought down and I had to talk to them. They kind of did the whole where on the doll did he want to film you? And so I had to talk to them, and they were like, was he pushy about it? Or they were very interested on his methods, on how he asked us if we wanted to be in the film, and how he showed us the film, as you can imagine. And it never really felt like I remember being like, this is a big deal, with all of the talks that they were having, and they were being very nice to me. I'm sure that they felt bad that I had started high school, and already a few weeks in, some guy was trying to film my naked young body, And so at the time, I didn't really understand. I was like, why is everybody, all right, so he filmed some people streaking. It's streaking. But looking back on it, doesn't really matter how you chalk it up. This guy was collecting footage of naked young boys. But anyway, I talked to them. They got all my statements. I told them how it went down that night, and then I had to talk to the child section of the police. So I had to go in, with my parents, and same thing. What did he ask you? The whole thing. And so because of that just bizarre situation right at the beginning of freshman year, the administration knew me. I think they liked me because they were like, yeah, he was cool about it. I was like, I'm fine. This was not that big of a deal. I'm not scarred or whatever. My parents didn't make a huge deal about it. So I think they were kind of like, woo! All right, so that's the KTGR incident. And then the one other thing is, so freshman year at the high school, they had locker partners. So every other year, the 3 last years of school, you had a locker by yourself, but for whatever reason, they put the freshmen with locker partners. And my locker partner was my best friend, childhood friend. And what you need to know about him is that he's just one of those guys you can't even compete with. He's extremely athletic, extremely good looking, extremely tall, extremely smart. He's a doctor now, married to a tall, extremely smart, good looking, awesome doctor. And my girlfriend and I, we saw them when we were home just for the holidays a couple months ago, and we were hanging out with him and his wife and his kids. And when we left, I turned to my girlfriend and I was like, their kids have to be the best looking, tallest, smartest, most well-behaved children I've ever seen. He's just one of those top of our class, valedictorian, great one of the best athletes on the basketball team, head boy, everybody loved him, one of those. So he's my best friend. And his family was Lutheran. That's the religion that they were, and and still are. And it's a pretty big religion in Grand Junction. And if you're Lutheran, you know all the other Lutherans, and you see them on Sundays. And it just happened that the head administrator from our high school is also Lutheran. So the top principal administrator from our high school not only knew my friend going in, but he knew his family, and they're all involved in the church. And also my friends, his parents were involved in the city and well liked in the city, and I guess you could say powerful in the city. I don't know. It's hard to explain if you've never spent time in a city the size of Grand Junction, but definitely they were like, they pulled their power or their weight or whatever it is. They had power in their church or the city, or I don't know. And so he was my locker partner freshman year. All right, so now we're going to get into the story. And like I said, this is out of all of high school, I ended up almost getting in like serious trouble twice. This is one of them. The other one, I'll just tell super quick, was junior year. And I was in a language arts class like most students are, and she assigned a book. The teacher, who I got along really well with, we had a great relationship. Earlier in this year, everyone had written something, and then she had picked a couple and that she really liked, like stories that she liked, and she picked mine. And then I went in her and worked with her one-on-one to work on the story to make it better. Then we were going to send it off to like some story contest. So she liked me, and which makes the whole thing worse, but she liked me, and we had this relationship. And I came in, or she had assigned this book to read, and it was we had to read the whole book, and then there was a big test at the end of the book, and I hadn't read the book at all. I had read the first page like a few times, and then just wasn't connecting, and I don't know, I just didn't read it. So I was really stressing out about the test. Like, what am I gonna do? It was before you could just get online and look up amazing study guides and everything. And I was like, what am I gonna do? I'm screwed for this test. And I was depressed about it and having anxiety about it. And then so the test was going to be Monday, and so I'm walking into the class on Friday, and I look, and on the teacher's podium, the tests are sitting right there. I was like, all right, well, I guess that'll work. I didn't want to be like this, but I haven't read the book, so I was like, I'm just going to take one of these, make sure I don't fail. Nothing, all good. And so I took one of the tests as I walked by. No one saw. Perfect. All right, all good. And then I sat down in my chair. Another good buddy sat next to me. So when he got there, he sat down. He's like, hey, how's it going? And I go, look at this. And I had my backpack on the top of the desk with the test in it. And I just opened it just enough where he could see in. And he's like peering in. And he goes, oh. And I was like, yep. And he was like, oh, that's crazy. And we're sitting there. And then the teacher comes in, everyone starts quieting down, and the shit just hits the fan. She gets up to the podium and she goes, someone took one of the tests up here. Who took, and just starts screaming. And she's going, I was going to have a study, because the test, it's Friday, the test is on Monday. She's, I was going to have a study session with you guys today, but someone stole a test, and whoever that is needs to bring it up right now. I am waiting. And so and everyone's groaning, and she's screaming, and so all of a sudden I was just sitting there like, well, this was not worth it and did not go the way I was expecting. I was expecting her to not notice and for me to go home and to look through all the book and read a bunch of pages and do the test, And so now she's just screaming, and it gets to the point where she goes, all right, here's how it's going to go. I'm going to leave the room. The class is over for today. I'm going to leave the room. If the test doesn't end up back on this podium when I come back in 15 or 20 minutes, we're not taking the test. Everyone has to write a 4-page paper instead on the book. And she slammed her thing and walked out of the room. And I'm just sitting there like, damn it. And everyone is pissed, what, And I understand if you did read the book and you're sitting there ready to ace the test, all of a sudden there's this nightmare situation. And I'm sitting there like, what am I going to do? I was like, you know what? I don't want anyone to worry about it. I screwed up enough, and I just took the test out of my backpack in front of everybody, walked up, set it on the podium, and without saying or looking at anyone, I just walked out. So that was Friday. So the whole rest of the day, I'm thinking, I'm going to get pulled down to the office. I'm going to get in trouble. Damn it. Someone's going to rat me out. And all of Friday went, and nothing happened. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I'm in the clear. Friday night, I got home thinking my parents were going to be like, we got a phone call today, and nothing. And I was like, all right. And then Saturday, nothing. And I was like, maybe I'm in the clear. Maybe I got credit for just being honest and giving the test back. And, maybe I'm all right. And then Sunday during the day, you've messed up when your parents get a call from the school on Sunday. So Sunday, the teacher calls my parents and tells them that I stole a test and that I did give it back, which she appreciates, but someone that was very angry with me did tell her that it was me and that she was deciding on what to do with me, I guess. And with that one, like, the word expulsion was being thrown around. I was like, expulsion? I had to take it. I didn't read the book. Why would I be expelled? Like, I needed to do something. And yeah, and I don't know. It ended up I either just like failed the test, or I think I may even have, like, they failed me in the class, or I don't know. It turned out not to be the biggest deal, but all right, so there was that one. That was the second one. But freshman year. All right, so already freshman year, the weird, hey, you want to see a funny DVD of a young naked boy? That weird thing happened at the very beginning. And then it was like more of a normal freshman year. And part of our high school was like open campus. So during lunchtime, if you could drive to a restaurant or home or whatever to eat lunch. Or if you didn't have a car yet, so us freshmen, we could walk somewhere. There's a ton of fast food restaurants and everything right around there. And so we're just, having fun, freshman year, high school, woo, and we're in, it's lunchtime. And we go and get some lunch, and we come back, and as everybody's getting back from lunch, this word spreads through the whole class, or just, and it's that one of the guys named Dustin had run into a porn store, like an adult bookstore type thing, just opened the door. He's not old enough at that point to even go in, had just, on the way to some of the fast food places like Taco Bell that we would go to, there was this just groungy, gross looking, seedy porn store that we would always walk by. And so I guess one day it was just too much for Dustin, and he just was too curious or something. And so he just did a smash and grab job where he just opened the door. I wasn't there, but the story is he just opened the door, ran in, grabbed a hardcore porn movie, VHS, and then just ran out. And he got back to school at lunch, like with the movie. And I still laugh to this day thinking, I don't know why, I always think of people that work in porn stars are guys with really long, kind of scraggly beards, bald but with long hair and like glasses or something. I think we went to lunch at maybe like 11:30 in the morning. So I picture a guy, long beard, bald, long hair, reading the paper at his, porn store job in the morning. Has to be pretty slow at those stores in the morning, right? And I just pictured him with his beard and then all of a sudden the door whirls open. A young kid runs in, grabs a movie, and just runs out. And he's probably just sitting there blinking like, all right. But anyway, so Dustin gets back. The word spreads. He's got this movie. And then the word after that is someone bought the movie from him. There was like a bidding war. This was before, porn was so available online and everything. So there's some sort of like bidding war started. And the story we heard is someone bought it from him pretty much immediately for like 40 or 50 bucks, which we were like, what? That is crazy. And also with that, people were like, whoa, Dustin shoplifted. That's wild. He's got balls of steel. He was getting like this credit for shoplifting. And me and my buddies were like, well, it doesn't take any skill to just go in there and grab something. We were all about finesse and like creating a diversion and finding the aisle without any cameras and really trying to. And so we were like, well, that didn't show any skill. We felt like old pros. We had felt like we had a whole like shoplifting career and then retired. And now we're hearing this. And so I don't know how it happened, but we hatched up a plan. And the plan is the old shoplifting crew was going to get back together, and we were going to do the one night, and before anybody knows what happened, it's already over. We were going to have our parents bring us to the mall, steal as many Playboy magazines as possible in one night, and then bring them to school and sell them. And my whole shoplifting career, I used a green Old Navy tech vest. You remember those? Like a fleece vest that got hugely popular that for like a year or two that Old Navy made. But mine was huge, too big, which is perfect for shoplifting because you can put stuff under it and they can't see. And so there was like that moment where we had decided, all right, we're going to get back into it, where I went back in my closet. And when you're that age, even though it had only been a year since or like less than a year since I had shoplifted, it felt like I was like getting back into the life. There's a moment where I like spread my closet apart and the tech vest was sitting there, and it's like, here we go again type of thing. And so we go. There's like a Barnes & Noble and a Target and a few things with magazine racks, and we stole all the Playboys available. We bring them to school, and they sold like hotcakes. At first we were selling them for $5 a piece, and then we're going through them too quickly, and then bumped it up to $10 a piece, and they all sold the first day. It turns out that 15-year-old boys love nudie magazines. And so we were like, holy smokes, it was that successful, sitting there with, not that much money, but when you're that age, you got all these $5 bills and $10 bills, and the plan worked perfectly, and we were like, yes. And like a lot of good crime plans that work out, the people get greedy. So we were like, let's do it again. That was too easy. And there was just a feeling the whole second time that it just started out so we went back to Barnes & Noble, and we again got a bunch of them and had them up and as we were leaving, the alarm went off and we had to just run. So they had obviously realized that someone had stolen all of the Playboys and then put little alarm things on them. So as we're walking out the door, and that had never happened in the whole, we had never even gotten that close. And so we just all booked it, but obviously we were on camera and everything. So I feel like in every heist movie, it always gets to where everything's like off the rails and everyone's on cocaine and their hair's bleached and just like they're way past their prime. We weren't like doing drugs or anything, but it just felt like everything was going wrong. So then we get back to school and we're selling them again. Everything's going good for one day, and I had I think I had like 2 or 3 in my locker. I would carry around a few to sell, and then there was like a few in my locker, and then I get to school, so that we sell more that day, and then I get to school the next day, and I open the locker. Remember, it's me and my extremely high achiever best friend, we share this locker. I open the locker, and it is very obvious that someone had searched my locker, and the nudie magazines were gone, and everything that was on the bottom was now on the top, and I knew I was done. There's nothing I could do. I shouldn't have left him in my locker. It was a stupid mistake. They had me with that at least. I just had this sick feeling in my stomach, so I went to my class, which was Spanish, and I didn't even unpack my stuff. I just sat there. I just knew it was over for me, and I'm sitting there going, what can I say? What the hell can I say? And I basically, in the moment, decide, all right, I'm just going to deny, and at most, they have nudie magazines in my locker, which is kind of a weird, thing to get in trouble for, but at least, that's it. That's all they can prove in my head. I'm like, my mind is just racing. And sure enough, right when that class started, the liaison officer, that's what we called it, which was if you were in trouble, he would just come and get you and bring you to the principal's office. So Wayne, the liaison officer, comes in, says to the teacher, I already know it's for me, and then the teacher goes, Scott, you got to go with Wayne. Like I said, I didn't even have anything unpacked, grabbed my backpack, went down. He immediately grabbed my backpack from me while we're walking down. And I get down there, and it's the head administrator, and he's probably like 6'4", 300 pounds, huge guy, little fat, but just a huge guy. And then there's a police officer that was always at our school, I think because it was 2 years after the Columbine shooting, so they made there always be a police officer. So he's sitting in there. The administrator for the freshman class, each class had their own administrator, and then there was like so they're all four in there, and I sit down. First thing they do is the liaison officer and the cop search my backpack, dump everything out of it while I'm just sitting there. And there's a manila envelope on the table with my locker number on it and circled. And the administrator starts talking, and he goes, all right, well, we got a call from a mom, and she found a Playboy magazine in her son's room, and when asking her son about the Playboy magazine, the son said that you sold it to him. We went and searched your locker. We found, and he opened the vanilla envelope, and he halfway pulled out, sets him down. We found these in your locker. So what's going on? Why are you selling Playboys at school? And I was not doing well at the beginning. I remember my mind was racing. I was visibly sweating. It was hard for me to look up because it's just four giant men, one wearing a police uniform, staring right at me. So I was just deny, and it didn't sound good, and I wasn't looking good, but I just was trying to stick to the plan and so I was just going, sweating and I'd look up and they'd all be looking at, it was like the Mount Rushmore of being in trouble, just look down, and I was just sticking with the good old fashioned, I don't know, I didn't do that, wasn't me. I didn't sell him a nudie magazine, just trying to make everything that they say sound absurd, but they had him in my locker. I mean, I really was desperate to find anything to stand on in the whole thing. And they were good. I feel like he was doing what I think is the best strategy for interrogation, which is just ask a very simple question and then just stare at them. Just look at them and let that awkward silence get them going. And so I was just like, I don't know. And he was like, well, why would he say that you sold it to him? And up until that point, this might have been my best answer. I was starting to gain my footing a little bit, get used to just how horrible it felt in there. And I was like, I don't know, maybe he just wanted to get out of trouble. It sounds, kind of, I don't remember exactly what I said, but kind of like, that sounds like his problem. If he's got a nudie magazine, and then they're like, well, we found these in your locker, which I agree is horrible defense. And the only thing I could come up with was I said maybe someone else put them there. I was like, what I said was, I was like, maybe some senior trying to prank us put them in there. I was like, I don't know. It's been a weird year, kind of trying to tie it back into, because I think they were pretty exhausted with all the weird sex stuff that happened earlier with that fifth-year senior, the TV guy. And so I was trying to just delicately tie it into that, who knows who put it in. Maybe it was a senior. I don't know. It's been a weird year. Yeah. Using my victim a little bit, but I don't really feel bad. It's all fair in love and war at that point. And so, but when I said, and this kind of changed the whole the whole winds a little bit. I go, maybe someone's trying to prank us. I don't know. And the head administrator goes, what do you mean us? And I was like, me and my locker partner. And I could tell by the expression on his face, he didn't know that I had a locker partner. And so he goes, there aren't any locker partners. And then the liaison officer, Wayne, goes, no, the freshmen did partners this year. And the administrator did not look happy, because now there's a whole nother human that shares that locker with me. And now I'm thinking, oh my gosh. And he goes, so who's your locker partner? And I said the name. and it's the name of the parents that he knows, and they go to his church, and they're good friends, and they, it's this whole, and so I knew I wasn't out of trouble, and I wasn't going to do anything, and I wasn't going to let my friend also take the fall, because I had told him, like, hey, I'm selling porns out of the locker, and he was like, all right, cool, and he was always cool about all my weird plans and stuff, but I wouldn't let him go down for it. I was prepared to just, if they started to get him in trouble, to come completely clean. But I was going to wait for it to get there. And so he goes, so who's your locker? And there couldn't have been a better person for me to pair up with, because, like I said, he's the star athlete. He's the star student. His parents are known in the city. They go to the same church. They're friends, the whole thing. And so as soon as he hears that name, his facial expression changed. And then I think that after seeing his face being like, oh, it's a lot more complicated than I thought, I finally was able to get out of like this posture of like, to like, gentlemen, let's talk. So, where were we? Locker partners. Yeah, I got a locker partner. And then there was another maybe like 10-minute hardcore where they were trying to get me to admit that I had sold this kid a magazine, and I just was not going to do it. I was like, I don't care how stupid it sounds, not me. And then it ended with him saying like, all right, well, go back to class. I am going to call your parents and tell them. And I stood up and tried to do my best to have the attitude of like, yeah, whatever, I don't care. Call, if you want to make a phone call, do it. You're a grown man. Like, that was my body language of like, yeah, call my parents, But in my head, I was like, oh my God, no, please, I beg of you. I was thinking I would rather have been caught with drugs, I think, than selling nudie magazines. I don't know, it just felt embarrassing. And so as I'm leaving the principal's office, soaked in sweat, I hear the principal say, hey, go get, and then the name of my locker partner. And so I'm like, crap. So I run. I'm like leaving the room like, all right, see you later. Yeah, you want to call my parents? We'll do what you got to do. And then Wayne had like a limp. The story was that the liaison officer, he used to be a cop in Compton. And now he like had retired, but he had a limp, and so he didn't move very fast. So I, knowing where my friend / locker partner was in class, I ran there. And so it's like almost like a scene in the movie where like Wayne is limping there slowly, but I get there first and I give him, and the administrators should have kept me in another room before they went and got my friend. But so I run there, get there way before Wayne because he's slow with a limp, and I'm this nimble, And so I get there way before Wayne, say, I got called down. In like 2 seconds, I was like, I got called down. They have 3 porns. I said that some weird singer like put them in our locker. Oh yeah, that's the other thing. The way, and he was like, well, how could they put something in your locker? It's closed. And I was like, oh, we, because we didn't want to put in the combination every time, you could like lift up the thing and put a little piece of paper in, and then the locker would still latch, but you didn't have to put and so it was just like lucky that I had that in the interrogation part, because they were like, what do you mean? How could someone put it in your locker? And I was like, oh, it's kind of known that we don't lock our locker. We don't put anything of value in it, so we don't really care to lock it. It just saves more time. We like to get on to class on time, and so it just is a time saver. You go grab a book. So I think it's known that we don't lock our locker. So maybe that was like the vibe I went. So I got to my friend before limping Wayne did. And I said, it's like, it doesn't really make any sense, but I said, somebody may have put it in our locker, and I don't know, good luck. And I like ran back, and I was like, I'll tell them it was me if they get you in trouble, but good luck. And I like ran away, and Wayne came and got him, brought him down. So that whole class, I'm just sitting there waiting for the day to be over. That was the final class. I was going to get to see my friend after and see what happened. And finally it ended, and I ran over, and I was like, what'd they say? And he was like, I don't know, they just asked me. I said that maybe someone put it in our locker. He said it wasn't too big of a deal, and I'm not like getting in trouble or anything. And I was like, okay, great. And then I had to face it went from anxiety of like, am I going to get expelled or suspended or be known as like the creepy porn dude or whatever? And then after all of that had calmed down, it was like, oh no, they called my parents. So I knew I had to deal with it. But what was not really saving me is like another buddy had been already planned that he was going to come over and hang out that day until like his mom got off work or something. So I knew my dad was picking me up. I knew I wouldn't get reamed out in the car because my friend would be there. And so sure enough, my dad comes. I can tell he knows because he's acting a little bit just quiet and weird. And then we go back to my place. We're hanging out. We're playing. Finally, like my friend's mom, he leaves. And still they don't say anything to me. And I'm just sitting there like, and to this day, I don't think my dad ever, I think they called maybe my house and then my dad's work, and then my dad answered. And I don't know if to this day my mom has ever heard this story or knows about it, but my dad did. And so then didn't say anything that night, normal night. And then the next day, as he was driving me to school, we're sitting there and it's silent. And he goes, got a call from the school last night. And I was like, yeah. And he goes, you know the difference between right and wrong, right? I was like, yeah. And he goes, do the right thing. And I was like, yeah, I will. And that was pretty much it. So that is, I guess, not anywhere close to a real interrogation, but as close as I've gotten to one, and just feeling the mind racing and the sweating and trying to stick to the plan of not confessing and also trying not to just look as guilty as possible. But it was a wild situation. I also learned in that whole thing, I really did learn my lesson, because I learned more than anything, I just hated the feeling of worrying that I was in trouble. So like I talked about that bridge scam out of Erie, Colorado, where somebody scammed the city out of $1 million. I think that was a slick idea and kind of funny, but I just would never want to do anything like that, because I would hate looking at, anytime my phone rang or there's a knock on the door, just worried that the FBI traced my internet IP address. I don't know. I would just rather not feel like I'm in trouble. So there's that story. Hope you guys are doing well. I'll see you guys next time. Okay. So my old apartment, you guys all know it, where the first True Crime Loser episodes were. That place is a few blocks from a really good record store in New York. It's either rated top in New York or even top record store in the world. It's this massive, and you go in there and it's just classic. It's like some obscure album you've never heard of but sounds really good. There's a bunch of dudes in sweaters with beards, combing through all the crates of records. And the owner of the record store, he's got long hair, and he's smug as can be about music, and he's got ripped jeans and combat boots, and he sits up at the counter and kind of holds court. And what's cool is you could go up to him and give him a couple bands or albums that you like, and he would he'd go, he's got the record store dude hair. And he'd go, let me think. Yeah, all right, I think I got something for you. And he'd go dig in some stack of old whatever albums and pull out some, and he'd be like, this will be your next favorite album. And he was really good at it. I think we ended up having a falling out, and I didn't go in there after a while, but like 2 or 3 albums, I'd go in there with a $20 bill and just be like, pick me out something, and and I would love it. And so it was nice. I felt like I had a music guy. And so there was another guy living in my apartment with me, a roommate. He actually still lives in that apartment. And he was friends with a guy, we were on the first floor, a few floors up. And that guy that lived a few floors up got a job at Vox. And the reason I actually thought about this story is because Vox's YouTube put out the video about the wet market that I thought was interesting that I was going to do. So that's what reminded me of it. But anyway, so this guy 2 floors up in the building is working for Vox, right? And he contacts the other guy, my roommate, living there. They were kind of friends. I sort of was just to the side of this whole thing. But so he contacts my roommate and goes, I got this job at Vox. We're filming a pilot for a podcast where we're bringing all these big wigs from the music industry, like people that review music, and I don't know, like a producer. I don't know. They had they brought like 4 or 5 people that actually have credits in the music industry together, and they were going to do a podcast about music. And he was like, can we film the pilot? Can we record the pilot for this podcast in your apartment? And my roommate was like, yeah, sure. And so my roommate asked me, hey, do you care if these dudes from upstairs, this is probably like 7 years ago, do you care if these dudes upstairs, he works for Vox, do you care if they record a podcast in here, like on whatever day? And I was like, no, not at all. And so I was like, and so he's like, great, it's going to happen, next Thursday or whatever. So before it happened that week, though, I went into the record store, and the guy recommended me this album, Kikagaku Moyo, Forest of the Lost Children, right? Here on the back, it says, turn it up till the birds show up. I always liked that. And this is skinny Japanese dudes with hair down to their back that play. You can't imagine that these little Japanese dudes create the rock and roll that they do. It's just an awesome album, right? And so he recommended, he's like, you're going to love this. It's at this point, I've listened to it so many times, I can sing the whole thing, and it's in Japanese. And so, at the time, I was like, oh, awesome. I went home, I listened to it a few times. I was like, this is great. And I set it on my coffee table. So this record, 7 years ago, day or two after I bought it, is just sitting on the coffee table. Well, the day arrives where they're filming, I don't know, a day or two after that, the day arrives where they're going to film this pilot for a podcast about music for Vox. And so all of the people start showing up, the techies, they set up all the microphones and the table and stuff, and they put up lights, and they put up the cameras and the recorders, and we're kind of just sitting there, it's our apartment, but we're letting them do their thing. And all of the, I guess, talent shows up, the people that, review music, and they all have some sort of credit, work for some magazine, something. And so they show up, and they sit down, and they record this possible podcast for Vox. And I just sat there because we had to be quiet so we didn't disrupt them. So we sat there and listened to the whole podcast, which happened in our apartment. And it wraps, and everybody's in a good mood because there's this adrenaline of they just recorded the podcast, and they're feeling good, and their drinks are poured. And this guy, I can't remember what he reviewed music for, but it was some magazine, but he had a drink, and he sits down on my couch, and he's like all spread out, his legs are all spread, and he's sitting there, and they're in a good mood because they think they're all going to be rich because of this show and everything. And I'm kind of just sitting there, and they don't know that this guy doesn't know that I live here because I haven't said anything. He doesn't know if I'm a tech guy or if I'm just the weird dude standing, I'm someone's friend, because I'm sort of just over there. And he's got this, like, I'm the talent, I'm part of the show, kind of cocky. We just finished the show. He's got this, like, he's really sitting there like he's got the biggest music dick in the room, just kind of and I'm kind of sitting there, and there's another band that is pretty weird and cool out of LA called Foxygen, and they've come out with a bunch of albums, but one of their albums went like nuts. It went huge, like soccer moms were loving it. And then their album after the album that went totally nuts had just come out like recently during this time. And so just to make conversation, I knew he would know that it just came out. So just to make conversation, I was like, hey man, what'd you think of the new Foxygen album? And you gotta remember, he doesn't know who I am. He doesn't know he doesn't know he's sitting on my couch, spread eagle, like, yeah, I'm the man. And so he kind of hits me with an energy of like, whoa, the little weird dude's talking to me. Like, can someone tell this guy, like, I'm the talent of the show? Like, I review music for some magazine. Like, he didn't say that, but he kind of like looked around like, oh God, this guy's talking to me. But I'm sitting there being like, well, if you could scoot over, I could sit down on my couch, but, And so he hit. So I was like, hey, so what do you think of the new? Just to make conversation, and he just gave me the smuggest cool guy response you'd ever seen. He was like, oh, you like Foxygen? Yeah, that's cool. I don't know. It's not really, because Foxygen's one of those bands that music cool guys, they just have to hate. It comes with the territory of being a cool guy, And I felt a little disrespected. It's my house. He's sitting there spread eagle on my couch, and I was just trying to be nice and talk about music. It's his industry. I don't really care, to be honest with you. I picked your favorite topic. I was trying to talk to the guy that's on my couch, and he was like, he just dismissed me like, oh, that's cute that you like that stupid band. Nice. Your taste in music is embarrassing. Thank you. That's like essentially what he said. And so I was sitting there just like, all right, well, since I was like, so what album, I kind of in the tone of voice of like, all right, since I'm such a pathetic loser, I was like, what album do you like? Like, recommend me an album. And if everything I like is just totally stupid, hit me, all knowledgeable one. Hit me with the good stuff. And so you can tell he's sitting there. And for a music cool guy in this situation, you can't just pick some album that everybody's heard of or that everybody likes. I mean, he's to live up to the way he's been acting, he has to pick he has to like blow my mind, some obscure that no one's ever heard, so you could see him. He was really like, all right, well, I made a big deal of that, how stupid the album he brought up was. So he's thinking, he goes, well, there's this obscure Japanese band, and just the fact that you start that, it's like, hey, recommend me an album. It's like, well, there's this really obscure, it's like, all right, you're a loser, man. But he starts with, there's this really obscure Japanese band called Kikagaku Moyo, and they just came out with an album. And at that point, I still was just kind of like listening to him, like, yeah. And he goes, Forest of the Lost Children. And he keeps talking about it. He keeps rattling on, like, I think it's actually the album of the year. And, as soon as, and in my head, I'm thinking, oh my God, he's sitting on the couch, and 3 feet from him is the album that he's talking about. So he's sitting there being like, yeah, I think it's album of the year, and I think that, people, once they hear it, will really like it. And I ordered the album, and it should be here pretty soon. I'm really excited to get it. And he ends, and it was almost like in poker when you have the nuts hand and someone's betting into you, and you're just sitting there waiting for him to finish, like, yeah, really? You're that cool? Oh, wow. And so he was going, yeah, I ordered the vinyl. It should be here soon. I can't wait to hear it, on vinyl. And I was like, I didn't say like, oh, I bought it today, or I just got it. This guy would have never known about it. I just calmly picked it up and said, oh, we could listen to it right now. Is this the album you're talking about? And I handed it to him. And the coolness ran out of his face, and he was dumbfounded that he was sitting here holding the album that he had chosen as the most obscure, unknown, cool guy album of all time. And all of a sudden he like sat up and was taking up less room and closed his legs a little bit. And I just kind of sat there and I was like, yeah, no, it's great. I love it. Yeah, cool. And he just, in that moment, he was no longer a cool guy. He was just a guy. And I later, I couldn't remember his name, or I would have probably just called him out in this episode. But like a year or two later, I was on his YouTube channel, and it was like all music reviews, and then the music reviews just stopped. And then it was like a trip collage of him and his wife being like, we're in, Nepal, woo, we're going to go eat some dinner. So like had nothing to do with music. And then after that, it didn't have anything to do with music. So it probably wasn't the moment that changed his life, but in my head, I like to imagine that in that moment, when he was sitting there, dumbfounded, that he maybe was not as cool as he thought he was, that it changed his entire life from that moment forward. And so I'm going to finish that story right here, right now. And it's a 4th of July story is why I thought of finishing it. So my family and another family. I was pretty young at this point, probably in middle school. And my family, along with another family, did a 4th of July trip to Lake Powell, which is this giant, really long lake. So you can see across it, probably still big enough you can't swim across it, but you can see across it. But lengthwise, it goes across 2 or 3 states, miles and miles. And so my family and this other family, they went together and rented. You can rent old houseboats. They're just old brown, like 70s houseboats from the marina. And you get in a houseboat and they don't go very fast, but you pull out and then maybe they go 15 miles an hour, 20 miles an hour. So you cruise on this really long lake for 3, 4, 5 hours, cruising along, super fun. You can get to go up top, pretend you're a pirate. So we cruised on this lake for 3, 4 hours until you're away from the marina and other boats, and you find a nice spot, and you just ram the houseboat up on the sand, put in some anchors, and then you're just there. And it's an amazing place to be for 3, 4 days, swim around, cook out, everything, the whole 9 yards. And so we were there for maybe 3 or 4 days, and then it was the 4th of July, and then the next morning we were going to get around and leave. So it's a great trip. Everybody's having fun. It gets to the 4th of July. At this point, we had our little wiener dog, Dugan. We called him Doogie, and the other family had a golden retriever named Reba. So at this point, Doogie and Reba, we'd been there for days. They were very comfortable. It wasn't always like we were checking in where the dogs were because they were just staying around. And so we're having fun on 4th of July. We're eating. It gets dark. We're starting to shoot off some fireworks. Nothing crazy. And at a certain point, it was like, where's Doogie? Where is Doogie? Doogie. Where's Doogie? He's just like a little wiener dog, so losing him for a second wasn't that scary. It was, one of those dogs. It was like, oh, there he is. All right, we're good. But we couldn't find him. And the party went from, hey, 4th of July, amazing grace, pew, 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 to, oh no, where is Doogie? It's dark. It's hard to move around without a flashlight, so it goes from 4th of July party to where's the dog? And everybody's searching, and after 20, 30 minutes, everybody is, starts to cry a little bit, and it seems even more desperate, and all of a sudden it's midnight, and I remember the adults making the kids go to bed. And I loved this dog, so it was a hard night to go to bed, and I remember crying and looking up at the stars, thinking, please, when I wake up, please let them have found Doogie by the time I wake up. And so I fall asleep at some point and then wake up really early. And that's why I talked about this in the Delphi, because they, same type of thing, were looking for the 2 girls, and then into the night, it's getting colder. They stop looking, which I disagree with that decision, but, what can you do? But they, my dad and the other dad didn't stop looking. They walked around all night long, 10 miles, as far as they could go. And I remember waking up as the sun's coming up on top of the houseboat, and just for a second, not remembering the nightmare that I went to sleep to, and just waking up and then hearing my dad way off in the distance being like, Doogie, come here, Doogie. And then just being like, oh no. And it's just all coming back to me, and just, getting up and going down and just feeling awful and the look in my dad and the other dad's eyes of just, they've been up all night trying to. My dad was wearing sandals and had kicked a rock walking around in the darkness, and his toenail was sticking straight up and bloody, and that bothered him for years. But so his foot was trashed, and it was just a low. And so we try to eat breakfast, but that's the day we were planning to leave. And so we start to pack up. And it's a 4-hour little long trip back to where the marina is, where you drop the boat off to get into the cars. And so we're in the middle of nowhere that you have to get there by boat, and the dog is missing. And so we're trying to eat breakfast, trying to pack up, sad, crying, and we're packing the boat up. I'm begging my parents, we got to stay another night, and they're like, we can't, we got to get the boat back, we got to get back for work. We looked all night. There's lots of coyotes out here. There's lots of things that could get him. And so the chances that at this point, and they're saying the worst. And so we pack up the whole boat. Takes a couple hours. After being there for a few days, you get pretty spread out with everything. So we pack up, and the final thing you do is you take the big anchors that you brought to shore and you jam them into the ground, and you pile rocks on them. And so the last thing you do, you unhook the boat, you put the anchors in, you put the ground anchors in, and it is just depressing at this point. Like, we lost a dog, And so we put the anchors in. Everything's in now. The whole shore where we'd been hanging and cooking is clean. And a few people get off onto the shore because you ram the boat up into the sand a little bit, ramming speed style. And so to get the boat off and so it can leave, a couple people push while the one person puts the engine in reverse a little bit, and it goes, and then you're free and you can leave. And so there's a couple people, maybe waist deep in water, pushing, and the boat is, and it breaks free from the shore. And then those people jump up, and they're wet now. And something about just the boat being let free and us starting to float away was just sad, because it was like, all right, we're leaving, here we go. And everybody, even the other family, it's not even their dog, is crying, and we're sitting there. And then someone looks up, I think it was my dad, and goes, there he is. And I thought he was joking, because I was looking the other way, and it just seemed like he was dead at that point. And I look up, and this coming down the hill is this wiener dog, just like if it was a Disney movie. I'm not exaggerating to make this story seem, he's running down the hill. So the person that had it in reverse quickly puts the boat in neutral, so now it's just floating. And just like a Disney movie, he runs down to the hill, and that maybe the boat is a yard from just like a superhero wiener dog. He runs and jumps from the shore, his little legs totally extended in both directions. Woo! He jumps from the shore onto the boat, into our arms. And everyone just is like, yeah, oh my God, Doogie, what are you doing? Where have you been? And just happy tears, and it was just insane. And you can imagine the 3-hour boat ride, how happy and just jubilant everybody was. It was like, he's back. What did you do? Where did you go, Doogie? And so that was Doogie's night in the wilderness of Lake Powell.